My name is Josie Komorowski. I'm the Early Learning Coordinator at the North Central ESD in Wenatchee, and we will get to know each other briefly this afternoon. Thank you for being here. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I have been working in early learning since I was in high school, and I have been working as a consultant and coach in inclusionary practices for about a decade. I am a twice exceptional learner, and I have a son who is a twice exceptional learner, and they are some of my favorite people to support in classrooms. And often we plan for students who are exceptional and have learning differences, but we forget to plan for adults who grow up and graduate and then join the workforce and become educators. And we need to keep them in mind as we're planning for our own instruction and professional learning opportunities. So that is what we're going to talk about here. But these are strategies that you can use with kiddos from preschool on up. I have used these strategies and seen these strategies implemented with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds very effectively. So know that even if you are using them with school boards or PTAs or PLCs, these are appropriate. If you're using them with little people, they're still appropriate. I'm going to do a lot of modeling in this session because we are so time limited. I think that we'll get the most out of our time together if you can see some of these strategies in action. So you'll notice that there is a colored bar on the left side of your screen and a small icon in the top left corner. It's there for a reason, and that is because if folks are using screen readers, that's the first thing that it's going to pick up. And it has some alt text embedded in it that tells them what section this is in the presentation. It's also a nice little visual symbol of where we are, and it aligns to the agenda note catcher that's available in that shared folder for anybody that would like a graphic organizer to help them keep track of their thinking throughout the session. I'm also going to share an approximate runtime of 55 minutes because that can reduce some learner anxiety about like, how long is this lady going to talk at me for? And if we were having a longer session, I would let you know when your opportunities for bio breaks were going to be so that you weren't doing that anxious double Dutch maneuver of, is it safe for me to get up and go? Maybe I should wait. How about now? We want to reduce learner anxiety as much as possible and create predictability. You're also going to see some icons in the slides. These are there to remind me of what I want to ask you to do, but also so that you, again, have that sense of predictability and ownership and know what I'm going to ask you to do. The unmute and share button isn't going to be as useful in this format with Hopin as it would be in something like Zoom, but I wanted to leave it here so that you could see what it could look like in some of the platforms that you might be more used to using with students and staff. The think time icon is there for slides that I really want you to be extra thoughtful about. And the little Bitmoji Josie is there for resources that are especially curated that I want you to make sure to come back to later. This is a super resource heavy slide deck. There's a lot of information here. And again, that's a way that I'm modeling planning for learner variability because I'm giving you just the information that you need today, but I'm setting you up if you want to know more about a lot of different topics to come back and be able to dig in more deeply. And because I have the chat box icon on the slide, means I'm going to ask you to type in the chat. But at any point, if you have a question, comment, reflection, whatever, please put it in the chat. I can see it. And I do not ever mind going on a bird walk if that is what we need to do to make this the most effective use of your time. So again, you'll find those slides and resources in the shared drive. You'll also find there the agenda and note catcher that I mentioned. It looks like this. Opened in the wrong spot. And you'll notice that it has the same color coding and the same icons. I'm using QR codes and tiny URLs so that people can get back to them, whether they are a printed copy or a hard copy, because I want to make sure that this continues to be useful beyond the 55 minutes that we have together. You're also going to find a lower ink copy of the slides because I recognize that some people want to print it out. And I don't want you to use all of the ink in your printer to make that happen. And some people prefer to have the higher contrast slides. And we'll talk about how I made all of these later when we talk about templates, but these are here for you. And I want you to know this because many people like to follow along in the slides and not just go at my pace. There's a curated resource collection. So all of the resources that are embedded in this slide deck, I've pulled out and made into a collection that is easy for you to come back to, easy for you to share with colleagues. I don't want this to feel like super overwhelming and intimidating. And when I've got 55 minutes to talk at you, it can feel that way because I'm going to be giving you a lot of information very quickly. So know that these are here. Don't worry too much about taking too many notes. Really focus on your own reflections. There's also an exit ticket that I'll share with you at the end that is really there to help me reflect on what I can do better in the future. And if you have anything that you want to reach out to me about later. Now, before we go further, who's here? We're going to take a look at these cupcakes and think about how you see them in the box. Because there are lots of different ways that our brains interpret information. Because brains are cool and variable, and everybody sees things differently. So I'm going to ask for you to put in the chat your name, the city or town that's nearest to you, and how you see the cupcakes. There's no wrong answers. I'm Josie. I'm in Wenatchee. And the way that I see them is 4 pink, 5 brown, and a weird brown, 5 brown, and 5 pink. I'm looking at the icing colors. There are no wrong answers. I have had people notice the sprinkles. I have had people get really focused on that weird brown one in the middle and spend a lot of time trying to decide whether that is like a cafe mocha kind of a cupcake or carrot cake kind of a cupcake, or if it's a muffin that doesn't belong with the cupcakes. I've had people connect it to the people in their lives that they know would like the different kinds of cupcakes and see all of the different flavors in connection to people. So there really are so many different ways that we can interpret and process information. Nice. I like that you guys are making assumptions about the flavors. Like it could just be pink, but it's strawberry or birthday cake or coffee. And I love that you have these ideas from your own prior experiences about the different flavors. That tells you a lot about how learner variability works. It's not just about skills, it's about so much more than that. Thank you for playing that game with me. I love this one. It always makes me think. Now you're going to notice that the color scheme just changed. This is a modeling again. I'm changing sections. The icon in the top changed. Now the reason that I'm pairing the icon with the color is for a couple of reasons. One, if you print it in black and white, you don't have the color, I still want you to know that it's a section change. So you have the icon. If you are colorblind, you may not be able to see the different colors. You have the icon available. And again, like I said earlier, I have the screen reader set up with the alt text right here so that it comes to that first. Okay. So before we get into strategies, let's talk a little bit more about what learner variability is, especially as it relates to adult learners. When we talk about learner variability, the kind of go-to guy is Todd Rose, and he has 3 patterns to consider in learner variability. Jaggedness, that we are not simplistic as humans. We are not one-dimensional. We are multidimensional, and our different dimensions don't correlate to one another in the ways that we might assume. So we have to be really careful about making judgments. The context principle is that it's meaningless to talk about behavior, performance, or learning independent of the immediate environment in which that learning, behavior, and performance is happening. This is just as true for students in our P21 system as it is for adults. We have to think about the context. It's critical. And he also talks about the pathways principle. For any outcome that you care about, there are multiple pathways to be successful, and people are going to differ in their pace and the path and the sequence of steps that they take to get to the end result, but they can accomplish great things if we allow for flexibility in that pathway. Now here you get to see the Bitmoji curator in action. This is a link to the video, The Myth of Average with Todd Rose that he did at TEDx Sonoma, and it's really powerful and wonderful if you haven't seen it. It's a great one to share with professional learning communities about the importance of universal design. And a lot of people just watch the beginning, but I would encourage you to watch the whole thing because towards the end, he talks about his own personal experience. And that makes it really kind of come together. Jaggedness is the principle that we're going to focus on because jaggedness really speaks to that learner variability. We all have it, so we can and should expect it. We can and should plan for it, and we can and should celebrate it. We would not be as rich of an environment, as rich of a community of learners, as rich of a country or a global society if we were all very static and one-dimensional. Having these really multifaceted personalities and abilities is what makes us really interesting. So if we know that it's coming, we know that learner variability is what's happening, we can plan for it. And that's where universal design for learning starts. It starts by embracing that knowledge that learner variability exists, that there's no such thing as an average student, and that every student has some strengths and some areas of potential growth, and that those areas can change based on context. And this is really important because the context can change in ways that we as educators or as leaders may not be aware of. And so we have to be really cautious about giving the tools that we think students need based on their skills in a performance in a certain context, because they are the only ones that know really what they need on a given day or in a given moment. We need to create expert learners that can choose for themselves from the options available. And that's what universal design is really all about. There's the Bitmoji again, taking you to the UDL guidelines. We're going to look at this more deeply later, but I wanted to leave it here for you because this is a really important resource for planning for learner variability. And when we plan for learner variability, when we embrace UDL, when we embrace inclusionary practices, because UDL is really just one inclusionary practice, play-based learning is another. There are many. We are moving towards a strengths-based model of instruction and moving away from traditional systems that compartmentalize instruction. And again, here we're talking about students, but we see this with adult learners as well, where people compartmentalize based on this idea of where they fall in the continuum of learning. We have our traditional learners, and then we have students who are either because we tell them if they're a student and we're pulling them out of the traditional gen ed classroom to receive remediation services through special education or other remediation programs, or adults who feel and perceive that they are not able to participate successfully in traditional instruction. And then we have the accelerated folks who are getting pulled for gifted and talented most often, or who are sitting in staff meetings disengaged because they do not feel like it meets them where they are. So we have these very siloed systems of instruction when we don't use inclusive practices that meet learners where they are. We can shift this by removing the marginalization for the students at the edges. Stop pulling them out and create environments where all students can learn by creating options that are open to all students and giving students and learners the tools that they need to choose what's best for them in a given context. So learner variability goes beyond just skill. We also need to think a lot about learner mindset, learner interest, and mode. If we're only asking students to engage through reading and writing and pencil paper, then we may not be planning for their variability very well. Their social learning preferences, whether they are individuals who are being pushed into collaborative work or people that work better cooperatively who are being told to work independently. We really have to provide options around all of these different areas. And I want to point out two things on this slide that are kind of important notes. One is in this screenshot, there are only two sets of pronouns. And that is something that I would provide some caution around. We want to make sure that we are balancing the use of pronouns for inclusion. We have his pronouns, masculine pronouns, and we have they and their pronouns, but there are no feminine pronouns. And so we want to make sure that we're being aware of things like that. And we also want to make sure that when we're using masculine pronouns, we are not always couching them in a deficit-based statement, because we tend to see an overqualification of males and especially males of color in remediation and special education services. So there's that little caveat. The second caveat is under social learning, it says, does the student prefer learning individually or cooperatively? It's not always just a preference. A lot of that is predicated on that student's history of trauma and may be more about trust and relationship building. So just a few little cautionary notes around this, because we want to be critical consumers of information at all times. But if you go to this, because here I am, I want you to go to this, it is still a good resource. It's going to provide you with some questions to help you reflect on how you are planning for variability in these different areas and give you some suggested actions that you can take to move your own practice forward. And again, I just want to really drive home the point that learner variability is the rule, not the exception. And I want to give you a little virtual field trip over to the Learner Variability Project from Digital Promise, because one size doesn't fit all. And these folks want to take some of the guesswork out of that. So this is a free online tool that takes some of the science around learner variability and gives you some really concrete strategies to use preschool through adult learners. So this is a big, rich tool. I'm going to scroll down just a little. So you choose a model, you identify factors, you get strategies. Super easy peasy. I'm gonna apologize for scrolling because I know that bothers some people's visual processors. So you'll see we have PK2, 3, 6, 7, 9. It breaks it down into different grade bands, math, reading, literacy. We're going to go to adult learners under general. So then we can pick factors. And these are factors that are critical to adult learning. Literacies, cognition, and you'll see as I scroll over this that different things are lighting up and fading out because these are the ones that are interconnected according to this tool. Social and emotional and learner background. We're going to click on learner mindset and see what happens. So it gives us this nice wheel that tells us about the different connected factors. And again, the lit up ones are the ones connected, and it will tell us more about it. And we can click on it if we want to find out more. It tells us some more information about the learner mindset. But wait, this is what I want you to see. These are the research-based strategies for this factor to support adult learners around mindset. Annotation, audiobooks, communities of practice, clear structure and presentation. That's what we're doing today. Creating visual representations. So there are a lot of things here that you can jump into to get really easy to apply information and strategies. So that is there for you. Come find Bitmoji me. She will point you in the right direction. Okay. What is rising to the top? You can put it right in the chat. And while you're typing, I'm going to say that this is a cheat strategy for me because wait time, especially in a digital space, is so hard for me. And so using a video is a way that I give myself a timer without giving myself a timer, because timers can feel a little bit like pressure for other people. And I don't want you to feel like you have a countdown to hurry up and finish. I want me to know that if the video is still playing, I need to not go ahead yet. So this is the way that I am supporting my own learning. So I'm supporting my own learning by using a video. See, now it stopped, so I can pause it. If I put a timer on there for myself, then it could create anxiety for you as a participant. There are a lot of folks that as soon as you add a timer to something, feel pressure. But for me, I struggle mightily with wait time. And when I can see faces, it's easier. When I can see that you're typing something, it's easier. In person, it's not a problem at all because we're like in the same room and I can read your body language. But like this, I don't even know if you're actually at your computer or what you're doing. And my natural inclination is just to be like, okay, there's nothing in the chat. I'm just going to go ahead because it's awkward to sit and wait. But I also am learning from you, and your ideas that you're putting in the chat are helpful to me as a facilitator. This morning in this session, during that video, somebody asked me to go back to another slide. And if I hadn't given them enough time, the entire group would not have benefited from that. Does that help answer the question? Yeah, Deborah, the icons and the color. And I'm trying again. The pace is really hard when I can't see people's faces because I'm like, maybe they're just like totally glazed over and I wouldn't know it because I can't see you. So I appreciate knowing that you're noticing the pace. There's a lot going on here, and it can feel, like I said, a little overwhelming, but I'm going to give you some strategies before you leave to like make this easy and doable. We're changing colors again, and that means we're changing topics. We're going to talk about proactive design strategies, and you'll notice again that I changed the icon in the top corner. So I'm going to tell you a story about why it's important to have proactive design. So for my summer side hustle, I'm going to open an ice cream truck. Yeah, it seems like a good choice. I live in Wenatchee. It's really hot here in the summer. So an ice cream truck, that's what I'm going to do. I am going to stock my ice cream truck with Snickers peanut brownie ice cream bars. That's it. That's all you get. It's your only option. If you could type in the chat, yes or no, will you eat that? I got a no, a maybe, and 2 yeses. So my sales success, oh, there's another no. This is not good. I am gonna maybe sell 2, maybe 3. It's not great. Okay. What if I expand my menu? What if you have all of these options to choose from? There's some ice cream sandwiches, there's some popsicles, there's some that are like sorbetto-y type things, fruit bars, there's some chocolate. Yeah, everybody can find something. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of every ice cream ever made on the planet, but this is enough choice that people can find something that works for them. Now, I am also not going to anybody and saying, okay, you get a Snickers and you get a SpongeBob bar and you get a Choco Taco and you get a Mickey Mouse, because I am not the best person to decide what you need. You are. So that is really important to keep in mind. When we are proactively designing, we are providing options. Doesn't have to be every option under the sun. And we are letting our learners choose what they need because they are the best deciders of that. So we have that learner variability tool that I showed you. We also have the UDL guidelines to help us put together that menu of options that we want to offer to our learners. And just a quick overview of how this is structured. There are 3 principles that align with the different learning networks in the brain. And under each principle, there are 3 guidelines. And under the guidelines, there are checkpoints. Now, the nice thing is when you go to the UDL guidelines, you click on this little guy up in the corner. This is all interactive. So you can decide that what you want to do is minimize threats and distractions in order to provide options for recruiting interest and increase engagement. You click on that, and it gives you all of these things that you can do. Charts, calendars, schedules, visible timers. Again, caveat that makes some people nervous. Cues, anything that can increase predictability. That's what I'm doing with the icons and the color coding and giving you the time ahead of time. Creation of class routines, alerts and previews that can help learners anticipate and prepare for changes. That's what the icons and the slides are for. I'm not going to tell you to talk without giving you an alert that that's coming so that you can mentally prepare yourself. Options, varying the level of sensory stimulation, varying the pace. Like there are all of these choices here, and they don't all require that you create something, because I think that's really the worry that a lot of folks have when we talk about this, is that they're going to have to create a bunch of stuff. And that's not necessarily the case. So between the Learner Variability Project and the UDL Guidelines, you can put together a really nice menu of options that students or learners can choose from. And when we're thinking about adult learners, we want to think about more than pedagogy. We want to think about andragogy and how adult learners learn. And so these are the principles of effective adult learning. We as adults need to know that the new information will be useful, that we are focused on solving a problem, that we are in an environment having an experience that allows us to feel ready to learn, that we are learning through the lens of our prior experiences. If it's disconnected from where we've been before, we're going to have a hard time with new information. We need to see ourselves as effective, self-directed learners, and that's where a lot of professional development falls short, is that it's really directed by administrators or other agencies, licensing agencies, for example, and that adults don't have a lot of self-efficacy and agency. And we need to understand why the new information is pertinent to us. Hopefully, it's clear why this is important and is connected to your own prior learning experiences. Now that we've talked a lot about learning principles and UDL and inclusionary practices, let's shift a little bit into the principles of design, because this is really how we take these ideas and put them into something usable. These are some principles of design that you can think about. Balance. How are things balanced? And here I'm going to talk about slides because that's what we're looking at. But remember, this can be applied to your classroom, to your office, to a video of your space and how you're using your body. Like you can apply these principles pretty much to anything. Proximity. How close are things to one another, or how far apart? How are things aligned? The visual hierarchy, that means that your title is bigger and bolder, and then as things get less important, they get less bold and less big. Repetition of elements. Contrast, you'll notice, you probably have noticed, that I have a lower contrast color choice on my slides, and that is very intentional. I use the gray background with the navy blue text because it's easier on the eyes, and I spend a lot of time looking at slides. So this is a color choice that works well for me. I also chose these colors in particular because to me they are calm and they're also warm. It's a warm gray. So it's calm and welcoming. And we're going to look a little bit at what happens to you and your reaction when we change colors in just a minute. And you'll see a little bit more what I mean. You can also think about negative space and how you're using the blank space on the slides or the blank space in your room to really call attention where you want it to go. Typography, so the fonts that you're choosing. Emphasis, we always say in our house to not put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. And when you are creating instructional materials, you do not want to put the emphasis in the wrong place because you want people's attention to be where you want it to be. Proportion, rhythm, the rhythm and flow of information and content. The pattern, movement is the way that things are designed to create movement in the way you're looking at it. If you were in a space, it's how you're creating a flow and how people are moving through the space. Variety, you want it to be varied enough to pull people's attention, but not so varied that people are like, I don't know what to do. and the unity. So even though I'm changing the colors on the side, everything else is staying the same. I'm not changing the font color. I'm not changing the background. Everything else is the same. There's a lot of psychology in design. So when you're making these choices, it's important to have at least a little like surface layer understanding of how the shapes, colors, and fonts especially can impact people's immediate reactions to things. And we also want to keep some Gestalt principles in mind. This is our tendency to unify visual elements into groups. There's an infographic on this slide because I know that that's helpful in understanding what I'm talking about here. We did a little bit of this with the cupcakes at the beginning. We also really want to think about emotional design and those visceral kind of knee-jerk gut reactions we have when we look at things, the behavioral reactions that we have. So I look at it and it makes me do something. So what do I do when I'm looking at something? And this is really important when we think about classroom design, because I work with little kids a lot. If we set up a classroom that has a clear open runway to the door, the behavioral design, the behavioral reaction is kids are going to run out the door. So we have to keep that in mind. And the reflective reaction is, wow, I just interacted with that information. Now it's got my wheels turning. And we can't, I don't I don't know how this is going to emotionally impact any of you because I don't know you deeply like that, but I can know generally that blue font is going to have a different psychological reaction than red font. I can know that having circle-shaped icons is going to have a different reaction than having squares or triangles. I can know that having font that is clear and legible is going to have a different reaction than a handwriting font. So those are just things to keep in mind. Expected design patterns are not patterns like checks and herringbone and plaid, but patterns of elements you expect to find in different places. So if you were on a shopping website, Amazon, Zulily, wherever you like to do your online shopping, you expect for there to be a buy it button. You expect there to be an add it to my favorites button. And you expect there to be a these are some other things you might like to look at area, right? That's what we have come to expect. We are the same way with things like slides. We are the same way in our classrooms. And so if we eliminate those, we need to either call it out and say why, or make sure that we put it in a place where people can find it. Because if we're hiding those expected design elements, people are going to be so distracted trying to find it that they're not going to focus on what we want them to see. And we can also plan proactively for the scanning patterns that people naturally engage in. So if it's very text heavy, people are going to engage in an F scanning pattern. They're going to read the title, and then they're going to read the main line of font, and they're going to read down the side. If it's graphics heavy, they're going to scan it in a Z pattern, the title, and then they're going to do a Z. And if we know that, we can plan and put the elements of emphasis in those places. So now we're going to do some testing. I'm going to exit out of the present mode. I'm going to see what you think, and you can write your reactions in the chat as I go. Okay, so I changed the color. Now I'm going to change the font. Okay. Now I'm going to misalign some things a little bit. Now I've made the visual hierarchy unclear because I've taken things in the middle of this and made them bolder than the things above it. So now it's not clear where you want me to look. Okay. I've made the contrast higher by making my text black on white background. Now the contrast is lower. Now, let's see if I change this font, because I really do like the handwriting fonts. I'm going to use a few of them because they're all so nice and cute. Now I have too much variety. Now I'm going to make the emphasis on my icon. And I'm going to change the proximity of some of these things. The icon here is not a button, but you can make it a button by adding a hyperlink and taking it to somewhere else. And I've done that in other places, but not in this slide deck. But that's a good question, Deborah. So I've just changed a whole bunch of things, and you got to have that visceral reaction to all of those changes. You're going to have a moment to reflect a little bit more on that in a second. But I want to get here first, because this is the important piece that I want to make sure that you leave with. And this is about templates. So once you fine tune what you like after you play with things, because you really do want to test it and get your own gut reaction, maybe have some other people put eyes on things and get their gut reaction, and make sure that they're people that are going to give you their honest response to how it makes them feel. And let's be real with one another. When's the last time you sent slides to a colleague and said, not how is the content, but how does this make you feel? Because that's not a question that I've ever gotten from a colleague. But I would love, if anybody wants me to look at their slides and say how it makes me feel, I'm your girl. I'm on it. Once you get there, make a copy of the slides or the agenda or whatever materials. If you want to use these, go for it. I'm happy with that. You're going to want to make all of your changes in the theme builder, which is under View. And I'm in Google Slides, but there is also a way to do this in PowerPoint where you're doing everything to all of your slides at once. In your theme builder, you can go here. I don't know why my text is not the right color. It should be navy blue. And it's not the right font either, but happens sometimes. But you change your background here and it changes the background everywhere. And this way, it's applied to all of your slides. Okay. Oops. And then you can delete the content. So all of these slides in the middle, delete those. And then you just have your skeleton copy. That mine has my introduction, my title slides, and my end. And then I go back in and put in my new content where I need it. And you can just copy that slide template and reuse it over and over and over. You can do the same thing with your agenda. And then once you have your complete slide deck, you can make a copy. I don't know why I went back into present mode. That was silly. go to File, make a copy, entire presentation, and then you can easily create this lower ink, higher contrast version by going back to that theme builder, right? Go here, change your background to white, click on your text, change it to black, and then it makes it super easy and it applies it to all of your slides at once. If you're going to reuse images like this little icon up here, the first time you use it, do your right click, alt text, put in your description, and then every time you copy and paste that image, it's going to have consistent alt text throughout your document. And you don't have to go back through and go, does this one have alt text? Does this one have alt text? Because you will have done it from the beginning. Put anything crucial for screen readers at the top left because it will read that first. Write down the colors that you're using. So if I go here and I hover over it, it's going to tell me that this color is hashtag 8B81D2. I wrote that down in my handy dandy notebook. And then when I made my agenda, I could use the exact same color by going into my document. Oops. This one. Going to the fill, going to custom, and typing in that color code. You can also use those color codes in other programs like Canva. I really like to do it that way as well because if I'm trying to eyeball it on two different screens, my color is not always the same. And so like for this, I was trying to set my blue and I was like, that's not the same color, but it just didn't look the same on my two different screens. And then also use emojis like these little guys or icons like these to help organize and provide additional information. You'll also see I have them up here in my titles, and those help keep things organized in my Google Drive. When you go to the shared drive, you will be able to find them more easily. And those are all from Emoji Keyboard. Okay. So we've got a new color, a new icon, a new section. Pause and reflect. Here we go. Oh, I lost my closed captioning. So when we think about that emotional design, there are 3 levels of emotional processing: that visceral processing, behavioral processing, and reflective processing. So in the chat, I would love to hear how you have processed your experience with design in this session through one or all of those 3 levels, or how you might approach design differently as you think about the learners you serve. And because the session might kick us out, I'm going to go to my next slide while you are answering those questions, because I want to make sure that I give you this link. If you have time to complete my exit ticket, it's a few short questions to help me better serve you and future adult learners. And it also gives you the opportunity to say, hey, I have more questions. I would like to hear from you. And I will reach out to you before the end of the day. Again, you can find the slides and other resources here. There's also a folder of new resources identified based on the exit tickets from this morning's session. So know that those are available to you. You're in here at the top where it says supports you asked for in the exit ticket. And if I get questions about things you need to implement this, from your exit tickets, I will add them there as well. And then lastly, I will be at a couple additional conferences this summer. So if you are looking for more learning experiences, you can find me at Arts Uplift and the NCESD STEM Summit. But thank you for being here today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the Future Focused Educators Summit. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.